It's time for more Manifesting Original Rich Bitch Experiences. I'm your host, Ava Beilke. Welcome back to the More Pod. I hope you are doing well. Today, I want to talk about public relations, specifically PR in the sense of the messages that we communicate about ourselves publicly, and how we really position ourselves in media outwardly to really align more with who we are, how we can leverage PR as a tool. And I also want to dabble into just a little bit of just media in general. Obviously, there's always a lot going on in the world, but it feels like right now, in times of challenge, we see a lot more tension sort of flare up in the media, we flare up online, and it can make it a more complicated space to navigate. So I also want to kind of dig into a bit of cancel culture, media literacy, basically all the things that we need to know about navigating our online experience, both as consumers of and contributors to the media. So to help me do that today, I'm joined by a special guest, Tiff Knighten. And Tiff is an award-winning PR strategist, brand consultant, and founder of Brand Curators. Brand Curators is a public relations and management agency helping influential people and businesses build, amplify, and monetize their brands. Recognized by Business Insider as a top PR pro in the creator economy, Tiff is also the host of Main Character Energy with Tiff Knighten podcast. And this podcast, I love it so much. She creates space for conversations on personal growth, mental health, and overcoming imposter syndrome, all really important things that we can just never get enough of. So with that, Tiff Knighten, welcome to the More Pod.
I'm so excited to finally be here, Ava.
Yay! I literally
so
can't say it without singing it, but I just... I'm not a singer, but that's like the little song that you get.
It stays in my mind. I think it works. It's like a method of just having a little jingle.
It's a little jingle, but it's live every time.
Yeah, well, it's killing it, so I love it. And I'm here, and I love the studio.
I know. It's so fun to have you here. We have been on each other's podcasts.
Yes.
I think once each.
Yes.
And we started our shows around the same time, I believe, about 3 years ago now.
That's nuts, but yes.
And it's so nuts. And it's also fun to just like see how far we've come.
Yeah. I mean, you have this beautiful studio. Both of us, when we first did our shows, we were like virtual, recording on Riversides and Zooms and things like that. And since then, we both gotten studios. So clearly next you have to come to the New York studio.
Yes.
And we'll just keep doing this. I think I'm going to be a regular like how KJ is.
I would literally love that. Do you want to be our resident PR consultant?
Yes.
Okay.
I said I
Done.
do. Oh my gosh. I love that. Okay, you guys will be seeing more of me.
Yes.
Great.
That's great. So I'm super glad that you're here today in LA. This is special. And we have come a long way since we did our Zoom situation, which I am proud of us for because we all start somewhere.
Yeah, better like done than perfect. Yeah. We got it out.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And I know that like we've chatted about entrepreneurship, sort of like nomading, a lot more of our kind of lifestyle stuff. Mm-hmm. Today, I'm excited to talk to you about like your profession, PR specifically. So before we kind of get too deep, I want to just start with like a baseline. Public relations, what is it and how can it help us?
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about PR, so I'm really excited to talk about it because I feel like I could talk about it all day, which is good because it's my profession, so I would hope so.
Yeah.
But I've had an interest in PR for a long time. Mm-hmm. It goes as far back as like my dad was a public affairs officer when he was in the military. Mm. And back when I was in high school and took one of those tests that kind of tell you like what career path you should take.
Sure.
I forget exactly what that entailed, but it essentially told me because I was like social butterfly and like I liked writing and I liked production stuff. It kind of steered me in that communications direction. Mm-hmm. And it was a combination between seeing what my dad was doing and being like kind of familiar, taking that test and also watching this show that used to be on MTV called Power Girls.
Okay.
Power Girls like changed my brain chemistry because it was about this firm in New York City. It was run by Lizzie Grubman. Lizzie Grubman was like this like 2000s OG, like she was the publicist. She did all the parties for like, I'm not going to name that one, other rappers like Jay-Z, like Skip. Jay-Z did all the kind of like big notable parties at the big restaurants and in the Hamptons and all that. And the show followed her and her like interns that were hosting these parties, and it looked really glamorous, but it also was a shit show because PR is not that glamorous. Like it would show the behind the scenes, but it was enough glamour to make me be like, oh my God, I have to move to New York City and do PR. Which I literally like, I immediately have to be a PR hot girl.
Yes.
And so I literally wrote in my senior yearbook, like where I want to be in 10 years. And I was like dominating the world of mass media at a New York City PR firm. And all that came true, except I had my own firm, which was not like in the plan.
Even better.
Even better.
Yeah, that's amazing. Talk about manifesting.
I definitely manifested that early.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to Seton Hall University. So I was one of those people, like I did know my major right away. Like I was like, I'm manifesting this, chose my major. It was an accredited PR program, which was great. There's only a handful of schools in the country that have accredited PR programs.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So the education piece of it made me feel like I was like, I got this. Like I was also an overachiever, which I think we've talked about before.
Yeah.
So I was like heavily involved. I was in the PR society. I was like a member, then a treasurer, then the president, and was like very like feeling like, okay, this is my territory. And it was cool because that type of education taught me like the integrated marketing communications structure of PR. So it really was based in essentially like knowing how to plan a campaign. So it wasn't just like little one-off PR things, which I'll kind of get into what like people think PR is, but it was going deep into the fact that like you're kind of tying together all types of elements. Like as a PR person, you're bringing together marketing and other comms and like internal comms, and all these things have to work together to work successfully. So, you know, I was like, I'm killing it in school. And then I swear to God, it felt like as soon as I stepped out into the real world, I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
I felt so prepared. And then, you know, you get to your first job and it was just chaos.
Absolutely.
And that's where you really learn. So as much as I thought I was like so prepared, nothing can prepare you than being an intern, like becoming those interns on the show and having to like just trek across Manhattan, unpaid, picking up magazines and newspapers, coming back, just having like an impossible amount of things to do, but also actually seeing how things like work in this industry. So I don't, you know, recommend that experience. I'm not the type of person that's like, oh my gosh, like you have to have an unpaid experience to like understand.
Right.
Pay people, but those are invaluable. Those are invaluable lessons.
Yeah.
So essentially a lot of what people think PR is like sending out a press release or maybe like cleaning up a mess, like a crisis communications.
Yeah.
PR now is also getting conflated with influencers. So some people are like, oh, like I'm getting PR, and they're talking about gifting. Like they're talking about getting like PR packages from brands.
Yep.
And PR packages comes from the fact that like usually it was like a kind of a function under public relations that you're fostering a connection with your audience. And so you might be getting some gifting. When I worked in television, we would gift like boxes to media that are like with some merch for like a show we're promoting. So that's kind of where that came from. But now people say it like a verb, like
yeah,
you know,
like,
so it's,
I got PR today. Let's like, unbox it.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, you didn't. But it's
so what is PR, Tiff?
Yes. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
But PR is essentially, it's all about relationship building, and it's all about knowing who your stakeholders are. So stakeholders are like anybody who's involved with your client or product or whatever you're doing PR for. So it's really kind of bridging the gap in communications, and it's letting people know basically like the transparency, the truth, the story behind what you're doing. And you're supposed to always be promoting some sort of goal or like messaging, and everything that you do is supporting that goal around it. That's kind of like an umbrella type of explanation. But then going further, you know, PR is so much more. It's like, it's really starting at that baseline. Like at our agency, we say that we build, amplify, and monetize. And that build is such an important piece of PR that people don't realize. Build is like saying, okay, more podcasts. What are we about? What do we want to be known for? What is our mission? What are our values? How is that being conveyed in like everything we do? It could be strategic partnerships. That's not necessarily press. That's not like a media placement, but it's something that can kind of like turn into a mutually beneficial relationship that could also become a newsworthy moment. Another example could be, you know, putting together like press kits, media kits. So thinking about how are we speaking on you as the host, and making sure that like your bio's in a certain place, making sure like your website looks a certain way so that you're prepared for impact. So that you have things all put together in a way from a publicist's point of view to potentially like draw in more opportunities. So really like opportunities, relationship building, and making connections.
Got it. Okay. And I think of like, you know, my background in social media, your background in PR, you kind of mentioned like there's this little bit of like blurriness happening, because I think with the rise of creators or even just like solopreneurs, public figures, it's like we can almost like we can create a lot of our own content, but then it's not necessarily like there's not an immediate path into like, okay, well, how do I get like featured in an article, or like where can I kind of like amplify into other areas? And from my understanding, that's kind of where PR can take over to help kind of position yourself and create those connections to potentially get press, right?
Yes, 100%. Like just, it's like, yeah, it's creating those pathways. And it's also, it's the positioning, right? Like kind of like what we were saying with, for example, like zhuzhing up your website or making sure your messaging is like hard hitting and something that connects with people and connects with your target audience, having them in mind, because then you're well positioned for like when that opportunity arises, it's very clear that you're meant to connect. So the positioning for like creators, for example, or like public figures, for example, it's kind of like also letting people know how they can connect with you, right? So in terms of social media, I think of it, it's kind of like the call to action. Like when you're like, this is, what action am I supposed to take as a consumer if I'm like on your website? You need to tell me. And it's the same thing with PR. It's kind of like positioning your brand from like a 360 perspective to tell people how they can connect with you, how they can like move forward with you.
And I would also assume that like some of this sort of brand building, this baseline you've talked about, like really getting clear on your values, like if we're just talking about an individual as a creator or someone that's a founder of a business, just really getting clear on what you stand for. I can see that being very helpful down the line when and I'm going to get to some of those questions, but like when we are trying to figure out like what to be speaking on, like what to use our voices on, like what really matters in terms of like taking a stance or like, you know what I mean? Like some of those kind of topics that we'll get into, but I can see that just in the beginning, having that strong baseline, that clarity of like who you are, what your goal is, just business or personally or otherwise, would be helpful for everything else to come.
It is. And it makes it clear to set that intention before you even get there. That's why I emphasize to people, even if you're not ready for PR, it's important to at least, again, have somebody from the PR perspective give some feedback on what you can do leading up to when you're ready to do PR. So a lot of times I will suggest, you know, I might say, don't waste your money investing in PR right now, which is maybe unpopular. I look right at the camera like I know a publicist is like, girl. But I'm just not the type of person to do that, because it's going to be, it might be something like we could, you know, get some we could get some traction, but I'd rather spend that time maybe saying, hey, let's do some consultations and figure out how we can position you better for when you are ready for press, rather than kind of jumping in when things aren't clear and you're like building the plane as you fly, which sometimes it happens that way just because sometimes people need the momentum or they have something they're working towards, like a launch or, you know, whatever it may be. But I just always recommend maybe start with some sort of consultation to see how you can be positioned, think of that long term, and start with the value driven, you know, ideation before you do anything else. We specifically at Brand Curators love to work with mission driven brands because there's a lot to work with when you're, you know what I mean? Like you just lean into your values and like what you stand for, and we can then immediately align, okay, here are some potential speaking opportunities that make sense. Here are some potential, you know, outlets that, you know, cover stories like this. Maybe if you're not ready for that, we can think about, you know, following what those publications are doing, or, you know, keeping an eye on who's winning these awards that we might want to eventually submit you for, so that we have an idea when we get to that point, what strategy we can take.
So then this gets to a good question, because I feel like I've asked you this a few times just personally, and I also have friends who are kind of at a point in their business where it's like they've scaled, they're feeling really good, they're looking to pull like another lever. Like, when is somebody ready to pull the PR lever, in the sense of like they have their marketing down or they have their personal brand really solid? Like, when do we need PR?
I say whenever you have a real story to tell.
Okay.
And I always ask people, because somebody, you know, people all the time, like you said, will be like, I'm ready for PR. And I'm like, what brings you to that conclusion? You know, like nicely, you know, that's not in a shady way, but just like, why do you say that? Because I just want to learn more about what it is that's making you feel like now is the time. And then I can come in and kind of guide in that way and say, you know what? There is a really strong story element here that we can work on, even if you don't have a large following or a huge launch, or like, you know, your investor backed, like all these other things that could be, you know, great for your brand. If there is just like a super strong story there and you're really passionate, we can definitely like move on something in some capacity. It might not be like a full-fledged campaign, but there might be a way to, again, kind of start seeding this story. But for folks who kind of come to me and they have a reason to do PR that's more about like satisfying, you know, somebody else maybe that's like kind of invested in the company and just like, well, they just say we need PR. Well, that's not enough. Right. Or, you know, if someone just kind of self decides, but they're not in a place where they've gotten like things together, like a website, you know what I mean? Like, where are we driving people?
Yeah.
You have to be ready for impact.
Okay.
So if there's like no website, or the socials are still kind of coming together, maybe you like didn't reserve any handles yet. It's like, let's get the foundation first. And again, like work on the positioning, the message, like, who are you? Because we are not able to talk to media and give them nothing. And also these are our contacts. Like these are sources that we've built relationships for like years. I've been in PR for a long time, and there's people I worked with like repeatedly. So I want to be able to give them something quality. And by quality, I mean just like something substantial. And I know we're going to kind of get into like credibility and trust and all that later, but like it is such a mutual cycle of doing that it would totally tarnish my reputation if I'm giving a journalist a story and a business, but it's kind of like half baked, and it won't even really, honestly, it won't even tarnish it too much. They'll just not care. They just like won't. There's like nothing to talk about truly. So it's kind of a waste of everyone's time. So I would say like have a strong story, number one. And make sure you have a basic foundation of a brand. I would say make sure that you have like some high quality photos. So whether that's like founder headshots or like product shots, high quality, like just do a professional shoot. Especially if you're e-commerce, there's a lot of like services you can use to kind of get some nice high quality imagery, basic shots ready. Have that. And just a way for people to contact you.
Sure.
Like I've worked with a lot of people who like their company doesn't have an email or a phone number. Like there's things like that kind of create a disconnect if you're trying to pitch media.
Sure. Okay. I feel like I understand the need to have a story to tell. And I also feel like it's very easy. I know I've done this. I know people have done this. They'll sit there and tell themselves like they don't have a story. They don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
Do you think that? I mean, I think everyone has a story. I think it's just a matter of like kind of getting it outside of yourself and like crafting it.
Yes.
But what would you say?
You're absolutely correct. There are, it's funny because I feel like there's a ton of people who swear they'll be like wanting to jump into it. They swear they have a story and there's not much there. There's possibly not much there. But I find that there's a lot of people that I interact with who like unknowingly have such a story. And that's kind of where I do come in. Like I might know the basics of the story. Like I might know that you had some sort of incredible, transformation or journey. And the way my PR brain works is like I'm kind of tying it back to other things that I know would capture attention. Like I might say, oh, that's very timely because there's something happening in the market right now or in the media right now that makes sense to talk about this. Like it's really like a why now also. I might think about like, again, stakeholders involved. Like I might think about like, there are some organizations that have popped up because of things like this. Or, there might be just like some other things that person might not be thinking about that, of course, I'm drawing connections to.
Right.
And so when I start working with somebody that I know has pretty much a story, I start to like extract the rest of the information.
Got it.
There are times like often when I'm talking with clients and they might say something offhand that they don't think is important. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the hook right there.
Like that is gold.
That is gold. And it happens so much. Like that's why I'm always taking notes when I'm talking with clients, because there's just the littlest things that I'm like, you aren't aware of this and you shouldn't be necessarily, or it's not that important that you're not. Like that's my job.
Yeah.
That I'm constantly in the news cycle, reading about things, understanding what things are happening that are newsworthy or that we can tie to like a greater audience that is bigger than this person. So it takes a little bit of like trying to pull it out of you.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Speaking of sort of like the context, like I think it's really easy to think like of things existing in a vacuum, whether it's like your own life or it's like your business or whatever it may be. But as we know, especially being like people of the internet,
very much
everything exists within the context of other things.
Yes.
Not to go like Kamala quote. Like I was like falling out of coconut trees, but wait, where am I going with that? Everything does exist in this context though of just what's happening in the world. And when I think about just the time frame we're in right now, it's June 2025. There's a lot going on. How does one even begin to leverage PR to like break out and to share their story when it feels like there's just so much content and clutter and misinformation and disinformation in the media? Like, how do you even PR in 2025? That's why we
need more real stories. Like we need to see some real shit because everything is just like regurgitated. Everything is like just so uninspiring or like ordinary that we see on the internet. Like you said, everything's just kind of like regurgitated, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this craving for connection too. There's this craving for real connection because there's a lot of AI, there's a lot of divisiveness, there's a lot of also like think about on platforms, I'm going to use like TikTok as an example, where you're curating this feed that is like really insular, right? Like it's, you can tap into like other sides of TikTok, right? Like if you like something, but for the most part, you're curating this feed that is like so specifically your interests or like what you want to see and hear. And so to break through the noise like that is something that people are like really probably going to gravitate towards if that relates to them. But also I like to think of it like as not just for you, right? Like depending on what the story you're telling is, right? Most of the time when someone has like something really impactful that happened to them or is like a part of their journey or story or life, it's usually like to like warn other people or to raise awareness to other people or to like find community with people who have felt what they felt or experienced what they've experienced. So it's definitely like a great time in the middle of, you know, all of this chaos to just try to have like genuine connections with people. When I say genuine too, I just want to like preface that with, we hear the word authentic all the time. Like we're all like authentic eye roll. But it's really a matter of creating your own algorithm. Like I always say, your niche is literally your special sauce. Like your niche is all the things that make up you. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be in like a pretty little package.
Right.
It's just a matter of like, this is what I stand for. This is my lifestyle. This is where I came from. This is what I like to do. This is what I'm working towards. That's fascinating. And so to just kind of try to fit yourself in these boxes where you're like, I'm beauty or tech or entrepreneurship, like you're doing yourself a disservice. So just like lean into kind of the multifaceted of it all.
That's always nice to hear. It's always a nice reminder because there is so much just like pressure to kind of niche down and be so specific. But to your point, that's not interesting.
It's not.
Like we are all multifaceted humans. And if there's a place where all that can exist, I feel like, too, that's how you kind of create community more easily because people will connect to different parts of your story or different parts of who you are.
Right.
So
you could be like blocking your own blessings in a way, you know, like there's some people, and I feel like that's kind of even happened with myself, like transparently with, maybe misunderstanding people that I actually really end up connecting with because there's just like so many parts of them that I'm like, oh, I wasn't seeing that. And it's so refreshing to see that. But I think we all like, you know, worry about being cringe or, you know, try not to show up a certain way. And then sometimes too, when people think of PR, they think about having this like polished, prim image and like, oh, like I need to be, you know, very like brand safe and like, yes, like be brand safe in a way, depending on what you're doing or who you are or who you're partnering with. But you need to also be willing to like just put out who you are and let people make that decision for themselves instead of trying to like force a decision on people.
Sure.
What you think about Ava?
So many things, but I absolutely see that. I want to know, like, what are some of the, like, in my head, I can think of certain things that could contribute to our, like, PR presence, right? Like, maybe they're quotes and articles, or maybe it's, like, blogs. Like, can we get, like, specific about some of these things that would be desirable, maybe, as a result of leveraging PR? And, like, can we think about, like, how we can even start to kind of create some more of those brand moments for ourselves, maybe before we even get to leverage PR? Like, what would be some of those good kind of media content pieces that would be of aim?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing comes to mind. Of course, I take a different approach depending on the person, the strategy, like what we're working towards. But I think because I work with a lot of thought leaders, there might be a specific reason why we choose some methods over others. I will give an example of, let's say I have a person who really wants to get more media visibility because they're leading an organization that's fighting for change. Maybe it has to do with, I'll give a specific example of like a client that I had that is like a voting rights organization. And they need more funding. They need more funding to do what they do. It's not a cheap thing. The funding goes to having more people on the ground who can actually talk to constituents, having like resources to educate people, having just general budgets to make sure people are happy and like their job, like really reasonable stuff. And so because they need that type of funding, they need to be showing their impact. They need to be showing that they are reaching people, that they are achieving this mission. And so it's so imperative for the founding executive director to be in these places talking about that mission. Not only for just the general public to kind of see and raise awareness for the organization, but also for people who already are investing, funders, current funders and investors, people who send donations in that like live in the state, so that they're seeing like, okay, wow, like my dollars are going towards something actually impactful. So what we then do is decide, okay, where we have to meet these people where they're at. So maybe we do a podcast press tour. There's a lot of people who might be listening to audio while they're in the car on the way to work and want to hear more of her story in depth. She's also like an incredible speaker and somebody who's really passionate when she talks. So whenever I have clients like that, I'm like, I want you on podcasts.
Right.
Obviously, we're big fans of podcasts.
We love a podcast.
We
Absolutely.
love the podcast. So that's like one of my main like tactics is like, let's do a podcast press tour.
Okay.
Also because we're going to talk about like, I love and respect and listen, traditional media is everything. It's so important. But a lot of times you get more impact from hearing, again, in full depth someone's story. Like right now we can like break down, we can like peel back the layers of all this stuff. So sometimes that goes a longer way than just a quote.
Sure.
So that's one way.
And traditional would be more like newspaper articles, magazines, like online articles, just like quick quotes, right?
Correct. And we still do that. Like, for example, you know, top tier print publications, we've gotten her in, and that holds so much weight because it's like these publications have been around forever. So when we're talking about trustworthiness and credibility, and you're going to be in like a Philadelphia Inquirer or like a Washington Post, people can draw that connection really quick. Like, okay, wow, you know, she was in the Washington Post talking about this. That's pretty big. And that's just kind of how people's brains work, right? Or it's also like the circulation. Like we have numbers on how many times those newspapers are circulated and where. So the reach of it is quite large, even though it's not digital. And I know there's a lot less like print publications, but again, the name holds weight, right? So then outside of that, you know, podcast, traditional, we might think now like more digital media. We have done influencer campaigns with them. That's more of like that new media approach that also made sense for the time being. There's a lot of like advocacy type of creators who are on their platforms every day talking to their audience. And that has become just like a gold mine for getting messaging out, because it's like these influencers are the new reporters. People are going to them for news and they trust them. And those creators are like so passionate about their craft. I know there's kind of a lot of disagreement or maybe like hesitancy about these types of creators, especially when they started to like appear at White House briefings and things like that. And cutting traditional media out of newsrooms. But they are doing the work because they don't want to misinform their audience. So they are fact checking, like getting information directly from the source because they're in those rooms now. And so that organization that we had like tapped into those creators who could help them get the message out. So those are like a few ways that we approach PR for them.
Okay. Interesting. Sounds like a lot of the new media, but it's like that makes sense because that's what people are consuming. So you want to your point, get in front of like where people are.
Exactly. And like where, like who is your audience, right? Like some audiences are, they could, if they're like much older, we might take a different approach, or if they're much younger, we might take a different approach, or in certain regions, like whatever it may be, we'll tailor it. I still like to have a strategy that kind of taps into a little bit of everything and not put our eggs in one basket. Because you never know. Like, for example, how do you like to consume media?
Oh, TikTok.
Yeah.
And
a lot of us do.
I love TikTok.
A lot of us do. What else?
That's about it.
Podcasts.
But less, I mean, I guess I was thinking like news.
Oh, okay.
Like I get my news on TikTok from a couple of, to your point, these creators who report the news. But they fact check the news. They're very timely. They're quicker than traditional publications. And they are flexible in that they can give revisions. They can just make another video.
Real quick.
So it's almost like, if you have asked me that question 5 years ago, I'd be like, Twitter.
Yeah.
But no, I like have not been on there since it's been ruined. But TikTok is my new kind of news source. And then for entertainment, of course, pods. But
right. But not as much like news.
Not as much, yeah.
Well, that's the exact conversation I had in a recent training, and we went around and we're like, how do you get your news? Most people said TikTok.
Yeah.
It was like TikTok and still Twitter, because like I just can't stop opening the app. So like I still look at it
You're
like
on there.
all the time.
Good to know.
I'm on there.
Good to know.
I'm on there.
Don't go looking though.
Yeah, don't look at my diary. I'm not on there.
Your digital diary.
But like to just like wrap up that point, it's like we do a lot of research to figure out who we're talking to. You can't do anything until you go so deep into who you're talking to be like, are they on TikTok? Okay, like let's put 75% of our outreach in like thinking about how we're touching base with creators or things like that. So that's kind of how we make those decisions. For some people, it makes more sense to go the route of maybe it's like not just getting out a message, but maybe it's like all about the credibility. Like if the goal of that organization was like, we just need to look legit, I might say like, okay, we're going to spend a lot of time submitting you for awards. Awards are legit, that's why they're there. Like, they're such a great PR tool because it just makes people say, award-winning like company. Okay, it's something you can put on your website. People check your website, credible.
Yep.
So these things kind of can be psychological as well.
Yeah, we're all about building credibility.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
I want to kind of shift gears slightly and think about just individual voices. I think that whether you consider yourself a creator or not, whether you consider yourself a business owner or not, if you consider yourself a public figure or not, most people have an online presence. And I think that in times where there's a lot going on, where groups are being marginalized, where people's rights are being challenged and taken away, when there's just a lot of ugliness going on, there becomes an expectation almost from just all consumers. Like, I think people start looking around and looking to people who they've maybe followed or been friends with or idolized or like consumed their media content. They start looking around for people to take a stance. Where do you stand on this issue? Where do you stand on that issue? Why aren't you speaking up about this? And I think that's a really fascinating thing because it's like we're all just people and we can all decide to speak or not to speak. But I think that, and I've even found myself personally, like recently been like wanting to get more vocal about what's happening in LA. Like, this is my new city. And I've seen a lot of things that don't sit right with me. And I've never really been one to kind of like talk about politics on my socials, but I'm like, I feel like I want to.
Yeah.
And people, I've also watched people attempt to speak out on things that they care about and have been like attacked, bullied, right? Like, we get this kind of like perfect storm of, are you speaking up or are you not speaking up? And are you doing it in the way that we expect you to? And if you say something wrong, it's creating this storm of pressure and also fear. Yes. Right? Where it's like, you almost can't win. If you say nothing, Tiff didn't say anything about this or that. If you say something and you like use a wrong term, like, you know what I mean? Then people go after you for that. All of this to say, I think that we all have voices. It's important to use them, but it's also feeling like a tall task almost.
Yeah.
So a couple of my questions for you are, just as individuals, I don't care if I have 5 followers, 500 followers, 5,000 followers.
Yeah.
What would you say, if someone wants to kind of like start using their voice more and they're afraid of misspeaking? And then if there is an instance where that happens, like, how can we PR it to kind of get out of this like cycle of fear and like the need for perfection?
I love this question, Ava, because this is still so timely from the last like 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like
really.
This has been ongoing. And I want to just like touch on what you mentioned about, you know, for example, being this is your city now, there's things happening. It feels weird to not say anything, but maybe that's like not something that has been your content before. And in those types of situations, I always say like, I love that more people want to have a voice. I think it's great. I feel like it should be encouraged more. Of course, it's the approach. Of course, it's like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And that's where I think it's best to always amplify the voices of people who have those things to say, that have been saying, you know, speaking on these topics for maybe a while now, or are close to it in a way that they already have that trust and credibility like in their communities. I always say like raise other voices that are speaking on this that are of value that people can learn from. And that's part of the education process of like educating ourselves on these things. Yeah. Because I think every single community, there's, you know, we're not so involved in like every hot topic that happens. Yeah. We might know people who it affects more than others. We might see it and just feel a lot of empathy for it. And so I think it's fair to be able to, at bare minimum, say, I don't agree with this. And it's also good to be transparent about like, I don't, just like what you said, like, I don't know how to speak on this, but I don't stand for this. And I would love to uplift other voices who speak on this topic in a way that I feel like is empowering and I can learn a lot from, and we all can learn a lot from. So leading with that makes a big difference. I think also if it were the reverse and you decided to speak on something and maybe you didn't use the right terminology or you like offended somebody, it's the same thing, but it's just like now in reverse, where it's like you take accountability immediately. Like, and accountability in a real way, because we see people try to apologize on social media, and it's like, girl,
not
you should have just
apology video.
Nothing's worse than the apology notes app. Oh God, like you have the notes app up. I'm like, oh God, it's like you should have just sat there, girl, and just said nothing. So
yeah. So what do we do?
What you do is acknowledge, like you take accountability immediately. I said something offensive, or I caused a stir with what I posted. That was not my intention. Like, just straight up, that was not my intention. Like, just taking accountability of like, I fucked up and I'm learning. And that's really it. And then a lot of times it depends on what the scenario is, but you could redirect it to a resource. You could redirect to, again, a creator that speaks on it that is like a great source of information, or a like redirect to a fund or whatever it needs to be that is like relevant in the moment. Maybe it's like, I was wrong, I'm going to sit this one out, but donate to, you know, the like LA Fires Fund. Like that's all I can do right now to use my platform, and that's fine. People are way more forgiving when you just call it out. If you're going to be somebody who wants to get on there and like apologize, but you're continuing to try to talk on the thing that you shouldn't have been talking on or misspoke on, you're just going to dig a bigger hole. People are going to be more angry. And at that point, it's deserved. But I also want to say that like people should take those types of reactions with a grain of salt, because we all make mistakes. Like there are people who are like in certain communities who don't speak on things the right way. You could be like queer and there's certain terminology you still use incorrectly. Like no one's perfect. But that's to say too that we do live in a world where people just jump on you. There's a lot of trolls. There's a lot of people who are like so quick to call it out. And so I think just like kind of take it on the chin and say, I'll do better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like you're like, don't do the notes apology app, but do just be honest and own up to your misstep.
Don't do the notes apology app that says like, I'm sorry if I offended you.
But
yes, like, but that's not an apology. And I have like I could literally do a presentation on like the worst apologies. So that could be a future episode.
Yes. That could be like a supplement, just like a roundup of the worst PR apologies you've ever seen.
Oh, I have a deck.
I would love to read that.
Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, we'll get into that because I see it too often.
Yeah. And I also like that you brought up the point of looking to other people, like who are maybe more experts, amplifying voices, people who you trust that are credible. So sometimes I guess that can be enough.
It can be
just
enough.
Resharing, amplifying. That's helpful.
Yeah. And I think we need to like take some pressure off of ourselves to be the talking head.
Yeah.
I feel that way often as well. Just something happens. I'm like, I feel like no, I don't need to have a press release ready because something happened. I could still feel like a lot of empathy and sympathy, and like I could really be hurt by it, or I could really like not like what's going on. And in those moments, I can redirect to somebody who's speaking on it in a way that I agree with.
Yeah.
There are people who are far better with words than me when it comes to
I don't believe that.
a lot of situations. Oh, Ava. It's very kind of you. But
I've seen your words. I've heard your words. They're great.
Thank you. I think yours are great too. And that's
Thank
the thing,
you.
like be confident in the fact that you're like, I don't like this. This is what I'm doing. Or better yet, you protest. And I find that to be much louder than words.
Yeah.
Taking action. And there's been times where I've had to remind myself that I take action in a lot of ways that aren't on social media.
Yeah.
And I've done my part. Even
There
if
you go.
it's making a donation, even if it's showing up somewhere, even if it's working with an organization fighting for these rights, all of those things count. Like all that looks different. Advocacy looks different, and it comes in so many ways. So I think maybe that's another pause that people can take when they think like, oh, I got to say something. It's like, well, think about it. Who are you doing that for? Are you doing that to make a statement to your audience because you think you should?
Yeah.
Or are you like pissed and you want to put something up that's like, I hate this, I don't agree with this. That's fine too. And just do it in a way that feels natural, and then maybe redirect to somebody who talks about it often.
That's a great point as well. I want to get your take on cancel culture.
Let's talk about it.
I've been wondering if cancel culture is canceled yet. Because essentially, cancel culture, just this like immediate kind of knee-jerk reaction where a group of people decide that they don't like someone for something, right? And it's like this has been getting so crazy over the last few years online. It feels like, a lot of the conversation we've had today, it's like there have been so many reminders of like, we're all just human and we're doing our best.
Yes.
And so like the cancel culture, it's a complete opposite of what we're saying, right? Where it's like, why are you going to be so fast to never give someone a second chance? Like, have you seen a lot of this lately just in your work, like being in PR? Like, has it been coming up back around? Like,
Yes.
What's your take on it? And what do we do about cancel culture?
Cancel culture is such a tricky thing because it's definitely still here. Because again, we live in a trolling society.
Trolling society.
We live in the comment section, and we're
do.
waiting for someone to fuck up. So I get the fear around like not wanting to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And a big part of my job is, hopefully having clients run things by me. A lot of times they don't. A lot of times they just like fly on by, and then you have to like work in reverse. But the good news is cancel culture does not last. That's my opinion on cancel culture. It just does not last.
Okay.
Even for people who are like long-term canceled, there's always kind of a period where the initial like stain of cancel culture kind of starts to lift because the news cycle has moved on. People have moved on. People's lives are different. Like it's just, they're not as outraged anymore. It's that simple. And we live in such a quick news cycle that there could be like so much hate for something or someone. And it's like, they're canceled. Oh my God. And you'd be surprised how in 6 months, if people even remembered what happened. There's been people that I've been personally been like, oh my God, canceled, hate them, can't stand. And like 3 months later, because it's like life is happening.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, everybody needs to remember this, that not everybody is thinking about you all the time.
Oop.
I said it.
You said it. And it's true.
You're not the center of people's universe. I mean, maybe to some, but you're not the center of the universe to most people.
Yeah.
And so they are over it, or maybe they moved on, and it might take a reminder. There's times where like I was like, what did they do again? Oh yeah. And it just doesn't even feel that deep at that point. Maybe it was still wrong. Like who knows what the circumstances are, but it's just not the topic of today. Someone else is canceled today. And it'll last until tomorrow.
For better, for worse.
So cancel culture like doesn't last. And again, when you get into a situation where you're like, oh my God, I got canceled. I've seen a lot of things like very recently of just creators. I don't mean to say like regular creators, but I mean like regular people like you or I, like where it's just like they did something. Maybe they said something that was offensive to someone. Maybe it was kind of like some ignorance, maybe, you know, whatever the situation was, it's something that then they work to now correct. If you're working with somebody like a publicist or someone who specializes in crisis communications, then it's not going to last very long because it's just, again, taking the steps. This is free. This is free information. Like before you even have to hire all that, it's literally just like acknowledge what you did. Speak about, like, just acknowledge fully what you did. You can't just say, like, I messed up when I did that thing. I said something crazy. I see that was not the move. And usually you would kind of want to also have a step of like, here's what I'm going to do to be better, or like moving forward or something like that. That step is kind of like just dependent on the situation, but it's really just more so like, hey, y'all, that's what happened and I get it. And then you give people time to react, but most people are willing to like uncancel you once you do that. That's why you can't wait too long to have an apology. And that's why you can't say nothing. If you go silent, it makes people create scenarios in their mind.
Interesting.
Kind of like, you know, if you get ghosted or something, you're like, what happened to that person? Are they dead? Like
story weaving.
The story
There's a lot of story weaving going on. Okay.
So think of it the same way. Like if you don't say anything, it gives people a chance to like then create a new narrative.
Okay.
So you control the narrative if you're like, that was stupid. I messed up. This is what happened. I'm not going to do that shit again. And then people will be like, yeah, okay. Like you can't argue with that.
Yeah.
And that's how you kind of like uncancel yourself.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm so relieved to hear.
Put that in your back
Not
pocket.
that I've ever been canceled and I don't plan on it, but it's a relief to hear that cancel culture is not permanent.
Yeah.
And that's always great perspective. The like, nobody is thinking about you the way you're thinking about you.
Yes.
That is applicable in many situations.
Just to get out of your head.
Oh, just to get out of your head. But then also, I never really kind of thought about this piece of like, the faster you do kind of like take steps, the less time you're giving people to come to their own conclusions, which I think that's a really valuable insight.
Picture like, it's like people with pitchforks. Like they haven't heard from you. And now it's like the tension is growing and there's like a mob coming after you. Like that's in like theory, like what kind of happens to the public.
Our
and
ancestors,
public opinion.
definitely. They're like, we know.
You know what I mean? Like that's, But I have to make a comment on the whole cancel culture. And I have a prime example of why cancel culture doesn't exist.
Okay.
Because Chris Brown is still getting tours. He's still booking out tours, selling out stadium arenas, still making a ton of money, still has been on the radio since like 2002.
Interesting.
Consistently, no matter what allegations have been had, no matter what things the public has known and seen repeatedly as an abuser in many ways, that is somebody who like, he's still successful. And that is just how cancel culture just will persist, especially for like men in the entertainment industry and many other industries, I'm sure. But we've seen it happen where there's been damaging, horrible, awful allegations and things that have come to light that like people just at the end of the day still support them.
Wow.
Can't be canceled. Yeah.
I mean, I don't listen to...
Me neither.
I don't listen to his music. I do not support. But that is an excellent example of the impermanence of cancel culture. Yeah. I never really thought about that.
Like, you can be self-canceling. Like, for example, for like, we are both in agreement that like, we don't support.
We don't support, to be clear. We do not support.
We do not support. Looking at the camera. But they're still rich and successful.
Wow. Great point.
Trash.
And trash. Great point.
Yeah. So whenever you worry about being canceled, just remember that.
Wow.
You can always come back.
You know I will. It's going to... Unfortunately, that has been filed,
Yes.
but I appreciate that. And thanks for teaching us how to be uncanceled as well.
Yes, you're very welcome. Please don't get canceled.
We won't.
But you got it.
We got it.
Yeah. In case anything happens, you're well prepared.
Well, the last thing I want to talk about today is media literacy. And media literacy, I've been thinking about this just in the context of navigating the news, the age of disinformation. I think there's been a lot of political propaganda. There's a lot of AI confusion. And even talking earlier about how people are getting their news, TikTok, totally fair game, but like maybe not always as vetted as it could be. I think I'm a pretty media literate person. You know, my career is online. I always studied journalism, you know, I've studied communications. Like I've had access to information. I feel like I'm a very savvy user of the internet.
Yeah.
But even so, sometimes I find myself just in the quickness of life, consuming media, consuming content, and not always like thinking super critically about it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a dangerous trap for everyone to fall into. So when we talk about like media literacy and what that means, I want to kind of tap your brain about how we can become more media literate. What are some things that we can be doing all the time to make sure that we are responsible consumers of content and also responsible creators of content?
Yeah, it's a really tricky time with everything that you just said. It's crazy because as millennials, we grew up in an era where we're the in-between generation, right? Like we were on the internet at a young age, but before that, we were also like taught so intensely to like fact check and like you can't use Wikipedia and you need to like cite your sources, all that type of stuff that's like ingrained in your brain. So a lot of times we need to like literally bring it back to those types of basics. Number one, like basic fact checking. There's something that I think a lot of us are guilty of. I will say even I'm guilty of as a media professional, where you get some information on TikTok and you're treating it like a source.
Yeah.
And you're like, you know, I'm telling somebody something and I'm like, oh yeah, like I heard this. And it's like, where'd you read that? It's like, oh, it was on TikTok.
Yeah.
Like, you know the joke. Like I read somewhere, I saw TikTok. And there's a lot of opinions that is like naturally formed. I want to use a great example. I wish I could remember the creator. I'm going to have to find it. But there's a girl recently who came on my feed who did a whole video about the fact that she had relations with somebody off of Love Island and they, you know, she was like there to kind of like spill some tea on their relationships and things people didn't know and how like he came back into her life. And like right in the middle of the video, like I'm sat, right? Like I'm eating popcorn, I'm sat. I'm like, oh my God, what is the tea? And she was like, I made all of that up. And she's like, and you guys believed it because all I had to do was cite a couple like really basic things. Like what I first did was I told you some basic information about him. She was like, I looked that up. I looked up a couple basic things to make it believable and I tied it back and I aligned some timelines and it didn't take me that long to do it. But because I'm sitting here saying it as fact, like you would have stitched this and like started think pieces. And she's like, before you guys do all that, this isn't, and she was like, and sadly, I don't think she even said this. I think I was kind of thinking in that moment, like, sadly, some people might have not even like made it this far.
In the video.
Before they start their think pieces, like outraged about the fact that there's some other girl.
Yeah.
And it really was such a prime example of what I'm talking about with like just taking this information as fact and not taking just like one extra step to verify these things. Like something like that is obviously like a lot harder to verify, but it's the fact that we get so wrapped up in it like it is true. Instead of just taking it with a grain of salt, like if that even is someone who knows him, like we don't know, but everyone comes on that app every day and shares their stories and like what happened, and we're all talking around like our tables about it, right? But to take it over to more like news, like hard news, factual things, we're in an age where news breaks really fast, right?
Yep.
Like you said, TikTok, it's faster to get the information, faster for them to issue a correction. But how many people saw the first video?
Yeah.
And it went viral. So I think it's a matter of just opening up good old googlenews.com.
Okay.
Google.news.com.
Okay.
News.google.com. If you open up Google, and not just regular Google, but if you go to Google News and just type in what happened, like, you know what I mean? Like, if there's something that you see, like, it's about just taking one extra step. If you get your news other places, that's fine too. But going to like a legitimate news source and just seeing who's talking about it, what other people are saying about it, before you start to just share information that you see. It is very hard. I've done that where I've seen information and I retweet it. So fast. And
lightning speed.
I'm like, that happened?
Yeah.
And I kind of think too, ironically, how Twitter has the feature where if you go to retweet something, it's so ironic that that platform of all places says, do you want to read this first?
Yes.
Yes. And it's about just taking that pause. So I think we're in a society where we're like, again, everything's immediate. We need it fast. We want it fast. It's spreading like wildfire. But we need to create more room for pause in so many ways, but especially to just question, like, how did I get this information and who does this benefit? There are some things that are put out there because it's benefiting that misinformation and changing public opinion, aka propaganda.
Yeah. Textbook.
Yeah. Textbook. Yeah. Damn, they got us. And like, who's it coming from? Yeah. Stop using the shade room as a source of information. We have to be better. So last thing on this too, because I'm talking about the shade room and like that's a blog, it's not a news source.
Okay.
We have to think about who's funding these things. That I know takes more critical thinking than the average American is going to do. But and I think maybe that's also something that I do feel like is a responsibility that I have and like a role that I do. So I'm glad you asked me about this because I do want to create more education around media literacy. Most people don't realize that some of these organizations, even the news organizations, like it's not like news organizations are perfect. It's just something that is supposed to be credible.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are conglomerates or like owned by like, you know, the same billionaire and they're all kind of spreading the same information and it's not varying. I've seen stories like, and that's why on the ground storytelling and videos have become so popular. I've seen people share videos where I'm seeing what's happening and then the news report later is much different. Yeah. One example is the mayor of Newark getting arrested at like an ICE facility. The story in all the mainstream media, regardless of if it was like right-leaning or left-leaning, was missing the entire plot of what happened, basically making it seem like he did something wrong. He was where he wasn't supposed to be, got detained, he messed up. And that is not what you're seeing. Your eyes are seeing on these videos and it's conveniently not shared. So it comes back to just like, what are the interests of the people sharing this information? And how can you at least try to find a couple other sources that might have varying opinions? Read things that you don't normally read. I read different news sources that might not be my main news source, but I just want to see how they're talking about things.
Yeah. That's a great point. Just considering the intent of whoever's creating. Or to your point, like, I think there's been a big shift also in like the large conglomerate news organizations and like the level of trust. Yeah. Because it continues to be eroded. And I love that you brought up, you know, you're like, I'm seeing something with my eyes and everything on these news channels is different. I've felt that way about being in LA. And that was kind of a bit of my motivation where I'm like, when you speak with people who clearly only consume kind of like the big traditional media, that perspective is so much different than like my personal perspective of having like first-hand account.
Yes, correct.
And that's really scary.
It's scary. I think about like our parents.
Yeah.
Like they don't, they are, God bless them. A lot of times, like not to dunk on like, you know, that whole generation, but it's just, that is what they are. It's they're consuming what they're consuming, and it's like this specific messaging around it. But when you are there and you're on the ground, you're seeing it, you know it's a different story.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult, but that's where your voice does become so important, to be like, this is what I saw. This is what I experienced today. And that's why it's so nice to see the behind the scenes perspectives. So another way to maybe like fight misinformation, I'll give an example of like what's going on in LA, or what has been going on in LA recently, and last like years, a lot of things going on with LA.
Yeah.
Is to take into account just like taking an audit of what you are seeing and experience, like what you're hearing, what you're consuming from the news, maybe what some of your favorite creators are saying, maybe things you're actually seeing with your eyes, doing your own research as well. There are ways to get research that have nothing to do with news media. Like there are tons of databases. There's tons of government organizations, websites, groups that are dedicated to just educating the public on basic things. You can go look yourself on like what some of these interests are. A lot of, especially like government politics, that information is public and for everybody to have.
Yeah.
So I think just like if you really care, just take the time to kind of look around and take your own audit and then form your own opinion.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done, but I think if we did just eat a little bit more of that, even if it was like on something you're really interested in learning more about, and then like sharing that can go a long way.
Yeah. Okay. So that's helpful. So it sounds like when it comes to like being more media literate, it's like the first thing is just like creating that pause. Creating that pause between the moment you consume something and deciding that you also agree that that's true or not.
Ask yourself, is that real?
Yeah.
Like literally, is that real from a standpoint of like, I don't know, who's talking about this? Who's involved with this? Is this is happening? Okay, let's dive deeper.
Yeah. And then looking at another source. So looking for some confirmation. This is a thing. It's not a thing. Looking at how different people are presenting it. Considering their interests, financially or otherwise, their intent to make you think or believe a certain thing. And then also just like some of that actual, like if it's something you want to get deeper into, like real research and just educating yourself outside of maybe the specific media you've consumed.
A third party.
Yeah, a third party.
Yeah.
And then just trusting your own experience too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a big one. Yeah. Trust your own experience. And like also to like talk to your community, like talk to your friends about it, like have a conversation where you guys can all bring something to the table. Like I heard this, I read this, and it's like now we can form some real opinions.
Yeah. I mean, that makes for good, interesting dinner conversation.
It does. And I like to be that person at the dinner conversation. So let's talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, are we going there? We're going there.
We're going there.
Yeah.
So just expect that with me.
As we're going to head into dinner after this.
Yes.
I cannot wait.
What should we talk about?
Oh my God, everything. Everything. Okay. Tiff, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like you've really helped clarify public relations, what it is, how it can help us. For those who maybe aren't ready, I still think there's a lot of good takeaways around just like always being very clear on like your intentions and your goals and your values and like your mission, for lack of a better term. We've talked a little bit about, using our voices and creating our own media and how to navigate cancel culture, how to be more avid consumers of media. Yes. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to share today before we wrap up?
I feel like that was a very well-rounded discussion, and I don't get a chance to talk about it enough. So seriously, thank you.
Thank you.
The only thing I just want to say is that we're definitely in a world where, again, we just like need some stories that are authentic. We need there's always going to be human interest pieces and, stories about overcoming or stories about connection. And those are things that I know a lot of us are craving and are still so important. And a lot of those types of things are are stories that we want to be hearing outside of, other interests. It has to be outside of just wanting to like monetize and outside of just, trying to be faster and better and AI and all these things. Like we're tired, like we're really all stressed out.
Yeah.
We're really all going through a lot. And so I just say, bring back some good old-fashioned storytelling and let's make some real connections with people. And we can do that offline as well. As much as I love digital, and that's a big part of our jobs, I think we're leaning more, the pendulum's kind of swinging back to wanting to be together in real life and in spaces. And PR can also help you do that, to just kind of come together and find your people.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Tiff.
Thanks, Ava.
It's been a pleasure having you in the studio.
The more pod.
The more pod. The more pod. Listen to the More Pod every Wednesday as I share the things that make me more me and discover a thing or two to make you more you.